Proverbs 31 is all about finding a virtuous wife. At least that's what I was told. And yes, the virtuous woman is all over this passage. But as I was meditating on Proverbs 31 this morning, I realized something that I'd never considered before. I want to share these insights and revelations with you, and hopefully this will encourage you in your own study of Scripture. Let's jump into Proverbs 31 to talk about the virtuous woman. Proverbs 31:10, this is where the virtuous wife discourse begins. And Proverbs 31 opens by saying, this is the words of Lemuel, an oracle that his mother taught him. So she encouraged him to find a virtuous wife, and she seemed to have modeled that in her own life. An excellent wife, who can find? Now, as you'll find throughout Proverbs, there's a lot of invitation to come and have God's wisdom, walk by wisdom. Wisdom is personified as a woman, and you can choose to listen to her cry in the streets and the marketplaces. And then Proverbs 31 seems to close speaking about a virtuous woman or wife. But I'd like to suggest that the godly wife that fears the Lord here doesn't just have wisdom, but we're actually looking at wisdom personified. And as I was reading Proverbs 31, I couldn't help but think of Matthew 6, because I've been reading that myself. And it's all about anxiety and the Sermon on the Mount, and Jesus saying, don't worry about what you'll eat, drink, or wear tomorrow. Tomorrow will take care of itself. Seek first the kingdom. So I'd like to just share some of the connections that I believe the Lord showed me as I read this morning. An excellent wife who can find. The idea is to seek for wisdom all throughout the book of Proverbs. Not just seek for a godly wife, but this godly wife, again, represents wisdom itself. And in Matthew 6:33, Jesus says to seek first the kingdom. And part of that involves seeking for his wisdom, trusting that his wisdom is better than and superior to our own. It says she is far more precious than jewels. This virtuous woman that fears the Lord and is a model wife. The heart of her husband trusts in her, and he will have no lack of gain. So there is an element of the husband here is kind of in the background, saying to described as trusting in her because he will have no lack with her around. The idea of trust in Proverbs is to trust in God's wisdom to guide your life, to trust him with the outcome of your decisions when you live by his wisdom. In Matthew 6:30, it says that we're to trust in God, that he loves us, that he cares for us, so that we can seek first his kingdom, so that we can trust in his own sovereign wisdom and how it's all going to play out. He knows the outcome. So there's an element of, hey, the husband here can trust in his wise wife, and we can trust that God's wisdom will play out the way it's supposed to in our lives when we just do what he says to do. And this husband has no fear of lack. He will have no lack of gain, rather. So wisdom takes care of her husband and relieves his worries because he trusts her ability. And this is what it looks like to trust in God in Matthew 6:33. We trust that God will take care of us. Just like the birds of the air, just like the lilies of the field, he'll dress us, he'll feed us, he'll give us water. And as we seek first his kingdom, he will add to us all the things that we need. She does him good and not harm all the days of her life. Wisdom does good to those who seek her and those who bind themselves to her by living by wisdom. And God does good to us all the days of our life. In Matthew 6, it's all about the days of our life, and you can't add to your life by worrying and stressing. So trust God to secure your life. Know that he does good to you, and all good things come from the Father of lights. And we can't add to the days of our lives, but we can trust that whatever amount of life God has given us, he will do good to us. She seeks wool and flax and works with willing hands, so she is not lazy or idle. She's working with what's available to her. She's like the ships of the merchant. She brings her food from far. In other words, the food that she brings to feed her family requires quite the journey. It's as if she's traveling a far distance when it comes to her work to bring home what's necessary. She's willing to go the distance. She rises while it is yet night and provides food for her household. When everyone else is sleeping, she's working, and portions for her maidens. She's even caring for those in her household who are at her service. So wisdom cares for her family. Wisdom secures their future by her diligent work and faithful labor. And this is what it looks like to live by God's wisdom, is that he will secure our future when we seek first his kingdom. All these things will be added to us. That's going to be the consistent theme that will be throughout Proverbs, is that God will take care of you, just like the birds of the air and the lilies of the field. Those are examples in creation of God valuing and caring for something. She considers a field and buys it. With the fruit of her hand, she plants a vineyard. Now, as I read this, she's obviously thoughtful and creative and resourceful, and she's productive and an entrepreneur, and she works hard and she's diligent. And Jesus actually in Matthew's gospel will speak of a man buying a field for the treasure that's in it, right? And then he'll talk about a man planting a vineyard and taking care of that thing and dressing the vine. And both of those parables are an image of God thoughtfully, carefully paying for his people Israel and caring for them. And that's primarily the application in those parables, is that God dug up the winepress. God, set up the vineyard. God leased it out to the tenants of Israel, that being the land. God purchased the treasure that he saw and, came down to actually pay for the lives of humanity so we could be in relationship with him. And Jesus laid down his life. And then that vineyard or that field is extended to the Gentiles. And purchasing Gentiles, he redeems humanity through Jesus' sacrifice. In other words, God's wisdom is at work in the world. If we would simply partner with him in what he's already doing, instead of trying to labor by our own efforts, we see this woman using what's available to her. And she's very wise and calculated and thoughtful in her labor. The way that God is in his wisdom in Ephesians 1, the way he redeemed humanity and sent his son and knew the cost and purchased that field, and he drew out the treasure and gave us the kingdom, all these different things. She considers the field with the fruit of her hand. She plants a vineyard. She dresses herself with strength and makes her arms strong. And I understand that at times there seems to be a parallel between this wise woman and God, and other times it's this wise woman and the wisdom we walk by, which of course is an extension of God. God is infinite wisdom, and we experience his wisdom. As hard as it may be to keep track of the analogy, the idea is this woman is set forth as someone who fears God, walks by wisdom, and then takes care of others. And that's what it looks like to seek first God's kingdom and live by his wisdom. She perceives that her merchandise is profitable. Right? So this is her recognizing the value of something and recognizing the opportunity to actually grow her finances and take her family farther. This is wisdom at work. And Jesus tells us that God values us more than birds, that God values us more than the lilies of the field. And just like this woman recognizes the value of something, we should perceive God's gracious decision to value us, and realize the opportunity God has placed before us, like this woman recognizes that, hey, I have something I can use, I have something I can put to work, and we should learn that, hey, God has given us something to put to work, and he values us, and there's value in the work he's called us to, that he fit us for good works before the creation of the world. Her lamp does not go out at night, speaking to her like diligent labor. She puts her hands to the distaff, and her hands hold the spindle. Now, wisdom is at work here, spinning to make clothing to cover her family and others, and she's viewed as working to cover even the poor and the needy in the next verse and take care of them. And Jesus says the flowers of the field in Matthew 6, they don't toil or spin, and yet God clothes them. In other words, this is not her family going to work and producing and she clothes them through that. It's she's putting in the work and clothing them. She makes provision for them to be clothed. And this is what it looks like to walk by wisdom and to enjoy or recognize God's wisdom in the world, is we see that God clothes us. And yes, often that is through our own faithfulness and our own diligent labor and seeking first his kingdom. But he's the one ultimately that makes these things what they are. And he makes things produce, and he brings the growth, and he makes our decisions result in what they do, and he takes care of us at the end of the day. She opens her hand to the poor and she reaches out her hands to the needy. And if you go back to Proverbs 31 in the beginning, there's a call for the king to care for the needy and to rule by justice and righteousness. And this woman, this wife, I think is wisdom personified, is going to aid him in doing that by caring for the needy and poor herself. So you're supposed to see this partnership almost. This king has rule, authority, power, influence, but he needs wisdom to guide and aid him in that. And so he needs a wise wife, not just on a physical, relational level, but he needs the wisdom of God to guide his rule. She's not afraid of snow for her household, for all her household are clothed in scarlet. In other words, this woman is ready. This woman is clothed properly for whatever the future holds. And Jeremiah 17:8 speaks of the man planted by streams of living water. And that tree, that human, is not afraid of the heat or anxious about the drought. And I think in Matthew 6, the temptation Jesus is addressing is this fear of tomorrow and the challenges that come with tomorrow and the needs we'll have tomorrow. And Jesus wants us to be so secure in God's love, so secure in God's goodness and character, the way this woman is. She's made provision and preparation for what's coming, just as we can trust God has done for us as we walk in his wisdom. Hey, if you don't know me, my name is Jason, and I have some free gifts for you on our website at abovereproachministry.com. Maybe you want to learn how to study the Bible. We have free Bible classes just for you. Are you maybe a newer believer? Go ahead and check out our Christianity 101 Foundations course. Maybe you hate videos. Well, we have a podcast, so you can listen to all of our messages on whatever podcast platform you prefer. Maybe you want to join or start a discussion group. Check out our map of all the current armed discussion groups all around the world. And do you maybe live near Greenville, South Carolina? If you do, you should check out our church on Friday nights. Visit movementchurchsc.com for more information. And if you'd like to partner with us financially, you can snag a copy of my book, Fruitful, or head over to the donate page and donate through debit or credit card, PayPal, Cash App, Venmo, Patreon, or even mail a check to P.O. Box 509, Inman, South Carolina. And if you want to make a ministry connection, feel free to reach out to me on our website. All right, I know that was a lot, but I'm done. So let's get back to the video. Verse 23, it says, her husband is known in the gates, right? He has a degree of influence and authority in that land, or in that city at least, in the gates. And when he sits among the elders of the land, she makes linen garments and sells them. She delivers sashes to the merchant. So not only does her husband have a reputation, but possibly his reputation is linked to his virtuous, wise, God-fearing wife. And so this woman is repeatedly said to be making clothing. If you notice the theme, over and over, she's making clothing, she's spinning, she's dressing herself, her family, others. And God promises in Matthew 6 that he will clothe us, that he's made provision for us to be covered, not just physically, but spiritually by his son's righteousness. So we need to be clothed in the righteousness of Jesus, and daily we need to clothe ourselves in the wisdom of God by walking in his ways and according to his word. Strength and dignity are her clothing, once again, and she laughs at the time to come. She ain't afraid, she ain't stressed or anxious. And this is what Jesus is inviting the Israelites into in Matthew 6. Instead of fearing and going after the things the Gentiles do and living like God doesn't have your back, like just seek first his kingdom, live by his wisdom. She opens her mouth with wisdom. And I think this is cool. Her wisdom doesn't just stay isolated to herself, but the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. She looks well to the ways of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. She ain't lazy. She ain't saying, where's my husband? I want to scroll through Instagram all day and make him take care of me. And you know what? I won't say anything else. Her children rise up and call her blessed. Her husband also, and he praises her. In other words, the children are calling her blessed. The husband is praised. Her family, it's not like they're bowing down, but they're commending her. There's a public validation, just like Jesus in Luke 7:35 says that wisdom is justified by her children. And in Matthew 6, Jesus continually says, hey, look to God as your Father. Live as beloved children who are cared for by a perfect, loving Father. This relationship between wisdom and her children here in Proverbs is similar to our relationship with God as our Father. He cares for us just as this mama takes care of her kiddos. And then as we walk in God's wisdom, we are glorifying or rather validating his goodness and glory through our own way of life. Our good works shine as light that points people to him. Just like her children here in Proverbs 31 are almost little testimonies of her goodness. Many women have done excellently, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceitful and beauty is vain. So there is the sexually immoral woman in Proverbs to stay away from. She's foolish. She's all about folly and disaster and death. This woman in Proverbs 31 is the complete opposite of that woman. So Proverbs is kind of closing up this wisdom literature and these writings by saying, remember, charm is deceitful, beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Wisdom is fearing God. And this woman is wisdom personified by fearing God. And this is what we're invited into, to trust in God, his wisdom. Fear the Lord. Seek after his kingdom. Trust he'll take care of you and give you all that you need to live a godly life. And wisdom is portrayed as clothing us with what we need. This is what God does, right? God is infinite wisdom. Not to, just reduce God down to some abstract idea, but the entirety of perfect wisdom is in God. And he cares for us by means of us walking in his wisdom. And his word outlines what it looks like to walk in wisdom. And so just like there is an eye towards, hey, temporary beauty doesn't last. Jesus says this in Matthew 6. Like the beauty of the lilies in the field, like that's all fading. The beauty of Solomon who clothed himself, that was fading. But there is a beauty that God bestows spiritually, inwardly, upon a person that truly has faith, fear the Lord, and walks by his ways. So we're invited to walk wisely and to have everything we need and not fear for tomorrow, not be anxious about what, uncertainties lies behind each day. But we can fear the Lord and seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. And just like we see wisdom providing here, give her of the fruit of her hands and let her works praise her in the gates. Wisdom provides assurance here. This virtuous woman who is wise and fears God, she provides security and comfort and care and clothing and safety. This is what wisdom is offering. If we would just walk by the ways of God. Just as a godly wife of wisdom is found, right? She said to seek for this virtuous woman. We are to find wisdom daily in all things, crying out in the streets, the marketplaces, the common places, the sacred spaces. For wisdom is in each moment that we're given by God. And we should seek for God in every moment. Find him. Find where he's at work. Find his wisdom so we can live according to his ways. So at the end of this, we're invited to walk with wisdom like we're married to wisdom. I think that's why wisdom is set forth as a virtuous woman or wife to find. The same way you would come into covenant with a spouse. There is wisdom as inviting us to essentially come into covenant and bind ourselves to wisdom. Like God says to the Israelites, bind this truth, this word, this commandment on your head, on your hands, on your doorposts, like everywhere. Bind it so you walk by wisdom. And we should bind ourselves to God's wisdom like a husband binds himself to his wife. And this does include finding a godly woman, finding a godly spouse, but I think that's usually all this chapter is said to be about. Like, here's what a godly woman is. Go after that, men. And we're like, okay. But there's, I think, on a deeper level, an invitation to bind ourselves to wisdom too, as you are even seeking for a godly woman and a wife that fears the Lord. And even when you do find one, to walk by wisdom yourself and trust that God, in his infinite wisdom, as you walk by his ways and seek first his kingdom, he will take care of you. Hey, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more biblical content just like this. We have hundreds of videos, but you might be most interested in these ones right here. Also, visit our website for all of our free resources and classes. And thank you so much for partnering with us financially to make this ministry even possible. Keep moving towards Jesus, and I'll see you in the next video.